All right, welcome everyone to our second day of the Undergraduate Careers Exploration Week. Today we're talking all about careers in the oil and gas and energy industry. We have a dynamic duo of panelists today and we're looking forward to getting to know more about their careers, more about the trajectories and paths that they've tread on, and we're looking forward to an engaging conversation with them. So students, just as a reminder, this session is being recorded and it will be posted next week on our SCS Careers YouTube channel as well as our Media Space channel. But this is a networking session, so if possible, please turn on your cameras and engage with our alums. I'm sure they'd love to see your lovely faces and get those questions ready that you want to ask them. So just a few housekeeping notes. I just wanted to mention that if you have a question, feel free to either unmute yourself or ask those questions, or if you want to put them in the chat or use the raise hand reaction at the bottom, you can also do that. If you're uncomfortable sharing questions in the open, you can also send them to me via private message, and I'm happy to ask them for you as well. But my role today here is to just facilitate our conversation. So I'm just going to be in the background. So hopefully, because we have a smaller group, we get to have more one-on-one interactions with our alums. So please, if possible, be as engaging as you can. So we're going to start off with introductions first. Since Eric is on my list first, I'm going to turn it over to Eric. And if you can just introduce yourselves, tell our students what your major was when you were here at Illinois, and a little bit about your current organization and your current role.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jennifer, for the introduction. So my name's Eric. I work at ExxonMobil. I graduated from U of I in 2022, so been working for about 2 years now, supporting the Joliet asset. And for those of you unfamiliar with Illinois geography, Joliet's just about 45 minutes to an hour south of Chicago, and it's a refinery. And here I'm a project engineer, so doing everything from building those big, tall cloud makers, as we call them, to things as small as control valves, which I was shocked I never learned about in college, and now I have to do it every single day. But that's a little bit about me. Outside of work, I really enjoy playing basketball and soccer and just trying to stay as active as possible. I'll let you go,
Perfect.
Natalia. Sorry.
Lovely, no worries. Hi, everyone. I am Natalia Recko, and I graduated with chemical engineering degree back in 2016. So I've been out of school and kind of in the career mode for over the last 7 years. And most recently, I've joined BP Ventures, which is a corporate venture capital arm of essentially BP oil and gas company. And right now, some of my job duties kind of consist on looking at new startups that BP would like to invest in and kind of finding their implementation within broader BP's ecosystem. So there's a lot of changing ways and a lot of diversity in what I do, but kind of some of the things I've been focusing on recently are some of the innovations in EV industry and some of the applications for core BP's assets. So I've been looking at AI in refineries most recently.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I'm looking forward to getting a deep dive into your careers. But students, at this point, if you have any questions, I'm going to turn it over to you all to ask away. So please introduce yourself when you ask a question. And yeah, let's get started.
Go for it, Bobby. I could see you raising your hand.
I appreciate it. My name is Bobby. I'm a chemical engineering junior here at U of I, and I'm super interested in going into, like oil and gas industry, but I found it was very challenging just to get an internship in like BP, ExxonMobil. And is there any like pro tips for me? I'm also willing to take a gap year or a gap semester to do a co-op.
I can go first. I totally feel you, because I remember when I've been trying to get internships in my sophomore year, it's definitely been challenging as well. And I think oil and gas is a fairly specific industry that goes through very distinct phases of boom and bust. And honestly, depending on how well oil and gas is doing, this will directly influence how many co-op and internship opportunities there are. And in terms of some of the tips I'd have for you is remain as engaged outside of the classroom as possible. When I was interviewing, some of my most well-received stories during the interview were not really maybe pertaining to my core education, but pertaining to some of the leadership opportunities I've had out on the campus, as well as research that I've been essentially doing ever since freshman year.
It kind of, to echo Natalia there, I think the key thing is drawing in from your extracurricular experiences. Even today, working here, I lead extracurricular programs that are seen as extremely influential and a positive thing that I don't spend maybe your quote unquote technical work on in my time. I spend my time doing other things like leading student engagements, kind of like the React. I don't know if people still participate in that, and being able to draw upon those maybe softer skills that you gain from those experiences and how those can make a real difference in your base job or your base work is really, really critical, because it shows you're not just somebody that can memorize a bunch of body parts. You can actually solve problems. You can adapt to new situations in different environments, not just the classroom. Everybody's
Um,
very smart.
yeah, actually, Eric, I absolutely agree with you. And to add up onto it, I realized, over the last 7 years that essentially everyone who comes into oil and gas is very good technically. So this is not a way that you can really distinguish yourself. And I think really demonstrating your soft skills and ability to lead a team and ability to connect with people and ability to you know essentially dissect a very complex problem into smaller steps, and pulling people together and kind of encouraging everyone to work on a common goal have been some of the most invaluable ways that you can really showcase yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was very helpful.
Awesome. Any other questions from
Oh,
our
hi, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Pedro.
Oh, hi, my name is Pedro. I'm a sophomore, also studying a chemical engineer. So my question is, did you guys know that y'all wanted to go into the oil industry and energy, or like you got to your senior year and you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna take whatever job I can get at this point?
I'll take that immediately. I said yes from a very early age. I was like a senior in high school, and I was doing chemistry. I absolutely loved chemistry, but we had these really small lab benches, and you can't really tell here, but I'm a taller individual, and I hated that you had to bend over these lab benches to like look at these little meniscuses in the graduated cylinder. Hated it. So I said, what can I do with chemistry, but on a huge scale so that I don't have to bend down into anything. And that was oil and gas was the clear winner there. And on top of that, I always had a passion for going abroad and meeting different people from different cultures. And a really cool part about ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, I'm not just gonna to limit it to our companies, is that international experience that you can have at a company like these places where we operate in over, almost all 200 countries, I think, between the five of us. And that I thought was really, really cool and impactful, and I could have that in my career. And that's kind of what made the decision so easy for me. And it wasn't a straight path there. I did CPG, consumer packaged goods, a little bit of consulting, and then eventually ended up in the oil and gas industry. But I don't know. It was an easy early decision for me. I don't know about you, Natalia.
that absolutely was not an easy decision for me. I actually started in U of I as a biochemistry major, and ever since I was 10, I was dead set on becoming a cardiothoracic surgeon. And I think I've kind of had this inflection point my freshman year where I realized that I do love school and I do love learning, but also I would like to make money and get out of school quicker than that. So the idea of, spending 8 to 10 next years actually finishing med school and specializing in a very complicated field was just not something I've wanted to embrace. So that's when I made the transition to switch to chemical engineering. And quite frankly, in my sophomore year, I did not know what I wanted to do at all. And it took me some time just, learning about what is out there, and what has kind of, radiated to me within oil and gas is the fact that oil and gas companies have been on the forefront of engaging in energy transition conversation. And I've been very passionate about it. As you know, the topic kind of started to emerge in 2012, to 2015, and that has been always something I've been, trying to learn more and keep track on. And I wanted to join oil and gas because I thought that it was going to be the most impactful way for me to actually engage in energy transition path, and kind of utilizing the assets and the expertise that big oil and gas companies had in order to kind of leave my mark on this path and help them essentially develop their own transition plan. And I think the other reason why I wanted to go into oil and gas was that breadth of opportunities. I did not know if I wanted to be an engineer for life, and I wanted to join a field that would give me the biggest kind of growing ability. And joining a large oil and gas companies means you have infinite number of opportunities outside of engineering to get to learn more, as well as connect with people. And I think that was one of the other things that I really wanted to get out of oil and gas, is to essentially figure out what I wanted to do and use their internal capacity to educate young people in order to figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Before we move on to our next question, I have a question for you all. You mentioned briefly about your current roles, but can you give us a little bit more of a deep dive into what your current roles entail, what you do on a daily, weekly, or even big picture kind of basis?
Sure, Natalia, I'll let you get a sip of water there. So what I do is you've heard the word project manager before, and people are always like, well, what projects do you manage? What do you really do? For me, it's a little bit like your end of year design class. So I like to use a fridge. Everybody knows what a fridge is, and it's a very easy example to figure out. So I, as a project engineer, a homeowner would come to me and say, you know what, Eric, I need a new fridge. It needs to be this big, it needs to be this size, and it needs to cool down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right, to keep my food frozen. So I'd be like, okay, let's say it's Jeff. Jeff's asking me, okay, Jeff, what type of handles do you want? What refrigerant are you going to want to use? Do you want the freezer on the bottom? Do you want the freezer on the top? Do you want the freezer on the side for some reason, right? There's all these different design questions that you have to ask yourself, and then you get those answers, and then you have to say, okay, now how do I actually physically build this? What type of welds do we need to use to ensure that those handles don't fall off after 100 times? What are the connections to the wall going to look like? What's the power source? Is it 120 volts? Is it 480 volts? Can the fridge take 480 volts? Do we have to transform it down? What is the paint going to look like? What thick is the insulation going to be, right? And you have all these different sort of questions that you're asking yourself that you have to go figure out, talk to some really smart people, get those answers, and then basically convince based on an economic case. So is it more margin, which is more economically efficient for the company? Are we making more money? Are you reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so becoming more environmentally friendly? Or are you creating a safer working environment? So you have these three different things that you're kind of justifying your project off of. And so it's how can you build justification to make sure that your project is actually justified, for lack of a better term, right? You wouldn't want to put a touchscreen TV on your fridge. That wouldn't be very justified, right? What's the use of a touchscreen TV on a fridge? But maybe some other piece of technology would, like a little ice maker might be justified. Now, take a fridge and think about massive pipes and reactors and all this other heat exchangers that you guys talk about in your classes. And those are the same types of questions that I'm asking for those. I'll hand it over to you, Natalia.
Perfect. Wow, I just got massive reminders of what it was like working at a refinery, and I really liked your analogy with the fridge. I'm definitely going to steal it in the future when talking about my past life as an engineer. But I would like to kind of base my answer on two different parts: what actually venture capital is and how it looks like in, you know, a corporate environment, and what type of different deal parts there are that I personally get, you know, engagement out of. So quite frankly, I did not know what venture capital was. And, you know, living in San Francisco, I laughed that I can, you know, throw a stone at the random street and it's going to hit someone who either works for a startup, works for a venture capital firm, or is a venture capitalist. So that essentially is a fund that, you know, people give companies money to go and invest in something that is driving their purpose, but it's also kind of expecting to make a financial return. So it's kind of like investment banking, but it's a lot more risky because you are investing in companies that are very early on. And in terms of a corporate venture capital, this is kind of exactly what BP has done. It, you know, it has created their ventures group and it has given us some money and essentially told us, hey, we are looking at exiting oil and gas at some point because of the energy transition, and we want to diversify our portfolio and diversify what we do. And essentially, we are their eyes and ears into what is happening at the innovation market. So what are some of the new startups in the energy field that are you know, out there, and what can BP essentially do in the future that is not fully related to oil and gas, but still allows them to use their current assets and operation and expertise to kind of, you know, create a name for themselves. And in this case, BP has narrowed down their investment areas in kind of 5 different fields. So as I mentioned, we still invest in core kind of oil and gas operations that essentially targets the broader decarbonization of the existing operation and making it more efficient to then limit its carbon footprint. We're also looking at any companies that are in EV space. So, you know, anything from batteries to grid to essentially anything that can help us figure out how we can utilize electricity on the market. We're also looking at bioenergy investments. So anything, you know, with renewable fuels and just getting oil and gas out of unconventional ways. And then we're also looking at hydrogen investments. So again, those are kind of very technical areas, but just to give you an idea on what I'm even looking at. And on my end, I'm an investment analyst. So it is a very broad job, and I never know what I'm going to be doing on a given day. But most recently, again, we have a fund, we have some money that BP gave us, and what we do is we essentially engage with a lot of different startups that are doing something cool. Like I mentioned before, we're looking at AI applications for the refinery. So we're looking at any companies that are kind of specializing in it or have something, have some kind of interesting way of developing such solutions. And we essentially look at them in terms of, do we want to invest in them? So, you know, do we want to kind of put some money and get some future shares or future ownership in a company and leverage this relationship to create value for BP. And in my case, a lot of my current kind of time involves looking at what we have in our portfolio and deploying those solutions into broader BP's operations. So for example, I've been working with a company that specializes in developing AI solutions for refineries and manufacturing plants. So I take that company and I essentially go to BP's refineries and go to their other processing plants, and I assess, hey, can you guys use this? Can it start creating value for you? And if so, how can we start kind of implementing it and getting a value out of it that is a lot more tangible to BP than just having some imaginary ownership in a company that has a high chance of failing. So in this case, a lot of it is kind of technology deployment and looking at different ways that we can use some of those very innovative solutions that people are developing out there and finding its kind of like its home in a broader BP's site and operations. And then again, because it's still an investment role, there's a lot of kind of end-to-end investing parts that I also get involved in. And in this case, it's looking at potential companies performing what we call a due diligence. So essentially looking at them on a basis of, can they actually make it in the market? What is their chance of success and what they can deliver to us that we can't get anywhere else? So it's very the job can get very technical, but the very interesting part is that you don't actually need to be a technical expert, because there are so many people in BP that we can rely on in order to kind of translate something very complicated to us, so then we can take it and essentially see if it's something that we think BP can take advantage of.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. Questions from our attendees?
Hi, I have another question. So during your undergrad, did you guys join any clubs or do any minors? What do you guys do to help you guys achieve where you guys are at right now?
I can take it first. So again, what we had mentioned before is kind of the importance of having that soft skills and essentially knowing how to get work done and not necessarily just being known as the smartest person. And that's something that I have kind of taken to heart, and I've focused on growing during my time in U of I. Just to give you an example, I was a resident advisor. So back in the time when ISR was still a thing and a building, I was actually a resident advisor there. And that was a very, very good opportunity for me to grow as a leader and develop conflict resolution and develop kind of alignment of different stakeholders to achieve common goal. And so that was very, very good for me in terms of developing those soft skills. I also was involved in IBC, so Illinois Business Consulting. And I use this as an opportunity to kind of supplement my overall education. And chemical engineering can get very, very technical, and I wanted to get a broader understanding of what even finance terms means, and kind of finding a way to create a more holistic understanding of operating a business. And whether it's oil and gas business, or it's a consumer good business, or it's a small shop business, I thought that was a very good way for me to kind of understand some of those terms and learn the business fundamentals.
Yeah, for me it was so I participated in React, which was a chemical sciences outreach program to local schools. Growing up, I had been a camp counselor. I was really passionate about being a spark for somebody else. I had a few people in my life who had kind of sparked that STEM career path, and it's kind of what I wanted to give back to somebody else. And so even if it was one kid that, pursued or even thought about pursuing more of an engineering centered career path, I think that's a success. Outside of school, even the extracurriculars, I was a soccer referee. which sounds really silly, but I did talk about it in my job interview. And really what I focused on was you have to lay out a set of rules and you have to hold a bunch of people accountable. So whether that's the players, whether it's the coaches, the really angry, upset parents at the 12-year-old soccer games, you had to hold them accountable, but you had to do it fairly, justly, and without a lot of emotion, right? Because you can't start yelling back at them. That's just not very professional. And that's where I learned a lot of, I guess, some of those soft skills like patience, making sure I'm choosing my words correctly when I'm responding to somebody to make sure that they're hearing what I want them to hear and not me coming off as angry or upsetting to them. And so that was what I think I got a lot out of. And I did that most of my weekends there. But in terms of actual school activities, it was React was my main focus.
Okay, thank you.
This is a question for both of you guys. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw someone just raised their hand.
You can go ahead, Bobby, and we'll move
Okay,
to
yeah.
the other one next.
What are your favorite parts of working?
I
That
like
is a
earning
pretty.
money.
I was just about to say that money is really good. I was broke as I don't even know what when I was in college, and I think that was definitely an empowering thing of, I can create a life for myself and sustain myself and another living being. I have a cat, and so I feel like I have someone else I am responsible for. But definitely that. And I think the other thing is I didn't realize how hard it would be to make friends when you enter work and you move into a new place. And I found that kind of, you know, through work, I've met a lot of people that I'm still really, really close with, and that helped me kind of create my own little circle of friends in San Francisco. And I didn't know anyone coming here.
It's refreshing to hear that somebody had that same problem. I'm still going through that, Natalia. So a lot of people at work are really close to me. I grew up in the Chicago area, so I do have some friends, but it's, a 40-minute drive if I want to go see them. So not that casual hangout that you might have at college where you can walk to somebody's apartment or dorm in 10 minutes. And so trying to find friends has been challenging, and work's giving me a lot of opportunities and outlets to do that. I think the other thing is working with a lot of smart people motivates you to be better. It's kind of like a sports team where if you play at the top level and you're the worst person on the team, eventually you'll play at that top level. And so that's kind of how I approach everyday work is I'm always thinking about myself as I'm, one of the dumbest, stupidest persons. I go into that room and I'm always learning something new from everybody in that room, and that's really exciting to me. And it keeps it interesting every day, which I think is interesting. It would get kind of boring if it was the same.
I also have to just echo that I developed a pretty strong imposter syndrome very early on, ever since I graduated, and it kind of helped me realize that maybe it was not such a bad thing, because it meant that I was around extremely smart people that have a lot of knowledge, and that always gave me an opportunity to kind of grow in terms of the skills I was trying to develop, or just learn a lot of new cool things. And I have to say, like, especially now when I'm looking at a lot of very different technologies, it's just super fun to go and start learning more about what the hell turquoise hydrogen is, or why grid optimization is so important, or what is virtual power plant. And I've always been kind of a nerd in this sense. I've really enjoyed kind of just doing deep dives into very random things, and that has been essentially doing it and making money out of it has been very rewarding to me.
It's good to be humble. I mean, it's good to be humble.
That was pretty helpful. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our next question.
Hi. Um, so my question for the both of you is, coming from a computer science background, what kind of opportunities are available for computer science in the oil and gas industry?
So at Exxon, we have a massive group that optimizes virtually all of our refineries. So a refinery is an extremely complex piece of equipment. It's got millions of inputs, millions of outputs, uh, millions of pieces of pipe going to and from different, I guess, reaction vessels and stuff like that. And so if you think about that, that is really a whole system that you have to work on optimizing. It's a lot of calculations, and folks are exploring right now, how can we use neural networks? How can we use AI? I'm going to be honest, it goes over my head. So maybe you understand it a little bit more on better setting up our refineries for success in the marketplace. And so I know they hire computer scientists to do some of that work for them.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I wish I did what you did when I was in college. I think there are so many different opportunities in oil and gas, and just kind of give you an idea of what I have seen again as a non-computer science person. There are a lot of opportunities specifically within the data science space, and oil and gas is a business that generates so much data and so much information, and kind of having the skill in using computers in order to make sense out of it, and filter the data and kind of create a business related story out of it is one of the most valuable skills. And I know we've been hiring like crazy for that. And then on the other hand, there are a lot of opportunities also, kind of as Eric mentioned, we do a lot of things with trying to develop AI and machine learning solutions for our existing business operations, and making them more efficient, reducing their carbon footprint, and your skills would be extremely valuable in that space. And again, something that I have heard that I know a lot of really smart people are working on is, for example, creating digital twins of some of the refinery units, or kind of some of like wells upstream. Again, I don't know much about it, but I know that there has those people have been on a forefront of really digitizing and revolutionizing this whole entire industry. So I think there are so many opportunities for you to use your skills and knowledge to really contribute to kind of the growth and the transition of those industries.
Natalia, you're giving away BP secrets here. But yeah, digitization is a big thing in developing ways. I mean, we had a crew out here a few weeks ago looking at how can we use software to detect leaks, to prevent atmospheric releases of potentially harmful contaminants and stuff you just want to keep in the pipes. So simple stuff like that. It doesn't have to be this big, extravagant network optimization of the entire world, but there definitely are computer science opportunities out there.
Yeah, and just to even add up, we have been a field that has been laggard in terms of developing digital solutions. And I think in terms of the growth and dynamic opportunities, this would be a great field for you to explore.
All right, thank you. And just for a quick follow-up, do you know if there's any internships opportunity coming up this summer, perhaps, or maybe a full-time opening from either Exxon or BP?
I mean, I know there are, and I would definitely encourage you to check their website for their most recent postings. Again, this is a large company, and there are definitely openings happening that I just don't know about. But I know that we are hiring for both internships and full-time positions.
All
Yeah,
right, thank you. Oh,
I was
sorry.
just gonna say, yeah, I would say it's probably gonna be better luck in the fall, just knowing the recruitment cycle. I think that's typically when most of our campus postings come up. And I know last, I guess, semester for you guys, we did have an opportunity or two, forget the exact number, come available for that at the career fair. Make sure to come see us at the career fair. That's what I can say.
All right, thank you, Eric.
Yeah, Eric was here last year during the career fair season, and it was great to see him then. So I'm guessing you're going to be back again this year.
Yeah, it was overwhelming for my first time to be on the other side of things.
Yeah.
Less
Yeah.
stressful though.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine it. But BP has very big operations in Chicago, so there are a lot of people coming from the Chicago office as well as Naperville and Whiting Refinery. So I'm not going to be there personally. I'm going to be there in spirit, but we do have a lot of people coming back to U of I for recruitment purposes.
BP's there. BP's there.
Awesome. I see Maddie has her hand raised, so if you want to go ahead with your question.
Hi, my name is Maddie and I'm a sophomore in chemical engineering, and I had a question for Natalia. I was wondering, are there many other women on your team, and do you feel largely supported by them and like by your managers being a woman in the industry?
This is a great question, and I think a very important aspect of, kind of my journey here. So in my current role, because it is a very hodgepodge organization, there are people from a lot of different backgrounds, and specifically on my group, I think we are about 50-50 in terms of gender representation. And I have to say that's one of the best groups for that I've seen so far. I think you would definitely notice that being different, especially at the refineries. So when I first started with Shell, I think there were maybe 3 other women as being process engineers on a very large team, and I never felt like I did not belong. And I think everyone was just extremely accommodating and understanding, and everyone is willing to mentor the heck out of you. And I've got a lot of support kind of through those channels. But also I think because this field has been historically underrepresented by women, you create very strong bonds with other people and other women that you work with. And I think especially after being at a refinery where I definitely felt underrepresented, the other women that I have been working with that had joined before me have been a great source of advice and mentorship and kind of helping me get the ropes out.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really great to hear.
Great question, Maddie. Yes, Bobby, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question for Eric. Eric, may I ask how many operators do you guys have in Joliet?
624.
600.
We are the smallest refinery on the ExxonMobil circuit. So Baytown, Beaumont, Baton Rouge, those are down south. They'll probably have close to double that amount. But we make the most money per
Okay.
person.
Wow, that's crazy. Does that mean there's more opportunity down in the south?
So actually, let me back up. By operators, what do you mean by operate? Like
Yeah, just on
engineers?
day shift.
Day shift?
Yeah, day shift operators. Yeah.
You likely would not be hired in as an operator on a shift schedule. You'd be probably put into a process contact engineer. I won't say a typical hour is 40 hours in a work week. Natalia can probably vouch for that. But you'd be put in, you'd be working days, and then you'd obviously be on call. You would have more opportunities in Baytown, Beaumont, and Baton Rouge. They're always looking for people who are geographically flexible. It's an important aspect in your career that you define early on is how flexible are you, because you can go somewhere where other people can't to get an opportunity. And I highly encourage all of you guys to remain as geographically flexible and open-minded, not just if you're interviewing at ExxonMobil and BP, but if you're going anywhere, because it can open up a lot of opportunities that other folks maybe necessarily aren't willing to take that risk or go somewhere for a personal reason. But sorry, it's just, to me, operator means process tech out in the field who can actually turn the valves and everything like that. Engineer typically means somebody in a position that you would likely be hired into. Sorry if that's confusing.
No, yeah, it's all good because I know that if the company is like huge, they tend to have more operators, and more operators means there's more processes, more process equipment means like hire more engineers, you know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely Baytown and Beaumont are probably our two biggest hiring locations, and the Permian Basin, if you're open to going to Midland, Texas. A little bit.
Similarly with BP, Whiting is one of our largest refineries, if not the largest refinery. So I think there are a lot of opportunities with BP, especially in a Midwest, if that's something you would desire to stay. But also, BP has a huge upstream facilities in Houston. So a lot of opportunities also down south around Houston and Permian Basin.
Do you guys have Cherry Point still, the refinery up in
We
Washington?
we
Okay,
do actually.
just curious.
But I'm pretty sure it's going to be the next on chopping list. And I think that's kind of very specific with, I call it an Atlantic divide. So that discrepancy in strategies that American-based oil and gas companies take versus European oil and gas companies take. So just to kind of elaborate on that further, there, especially with Shell and BP, there's been a lot of pressure to accelerate energy transition and accelerate kind of leaving conventional oil and gas. So we've been shedding, as I call it, a lot of our refining assets in US. So that's what I meant. It's probably next on the chopping block.
Interesting.
Awesome. Any other questions from students?
I have one last question direct to both of you. So when you guys first started, how did you guys deal with the lack of experience in the industry?
I didn't know what a flange was. I didn't know what a control valve was. I barely knew what a heat exchanger was. I mean, I knew what it looked like on paper, but um, in reality, there's a lot more that goes into it than what you guys learned in class. Um, I didn't even know what crude oil looked like, to be perfectly honest. I knew it was black, tarry stuff, but never seen it before. And so it's really I guess, trial by error. You're drinking from a fire hose and it's all kind of coming at you, and you'll get a little bit, you'll get a little bit, you'll get a little bit, and eventually you'll get there. And that was really fun for me. It's really overwhelming your first couple weeks, and you're like, oh my gosh, you get that imposter syndrome that Natalia was kind of talking about. But if you just keep plugging away at it and learning and having a really open mind and staying humble, that you're not going to know everything in a week, you're not going to know everything in a year, you're not going to know everything in 10 years. Then it kind of will start to click. You'll get good at your job, and then they'll move you in 2 years to a completely other industry, completely other role, where you'll have to go through the same learning experience, which is something that I really like. Some people don't, but I think that makes it interesting and keeps, your life different.
Quite frankly, I felt lost for like the first 6 months. And similarly to Eric, excuse my French, I did not know jack about shit. I went out on the site and I was just like, I did not even know how a valve looked like, what a flange was, or what control systems were, or just it all seemed very abstract and very just weird and unknown and scary. And I think adding on to what Eric said, being humble is going to be one of the best things you can do. Be humble and don't pretend you know something when you don't know it. People can really quickly tell the difference, and be honest with other people and ask as many questions as you can. Honestly, for me, that was one of the best things I've done very early on is, when I started to learn, I always tried to find another kind of person who was doing the same thing as I was, but who was 1-2 year my senior, and learning from that person and having someone you can ask what might seem like really stupid questions is going to be extremely powerful. But really, don't be afraid of admitting that you don't know something, because you're not hired there as an expert. You are hired there as a person who is very intelligent and have a strong capacity to learn. And that's kind of the expectation that they are setting up to you over your next 2 years, 3 years as a new hire. So you're there to learn. They don't expect you to know anything on day one.
I have to know what different types of welds are. Didn't learn that in college.
Oh my God, yes.
To
Yeah,
be completely honest, I'm still learning. But yeah, you'll learn. You get to learn a lot.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you shared that humbling experience, because I'm sure students will find that reassuring. And as you said, any job that you go into, they'll provide the technical skills that are needed. They'll provide the training, as long as you demonstrate that you're willing to learn and you're curious about it. So just my 2 cents on that.
How many of you
that
guys
is
use a?
absolutely the thing. Yes. I'm sorry, Eric?
Oh, okay. Sorry. How many of you guys use like a ChemCAD or some sort of software to do any of your chemistry? You guys can just raise your hand. Anybody use anything? No software? I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I haven't used a calculator since I started. I've got these really fun, fancy tools that do a lot of those hard things that you guys all do by hand on paper that takes you like, 3 sheets to go through your equations and mass balances. So it makes a big difference. And the most important part is that you know how those results are being gotten from that software, not necessarily how to simplify the Navier-Stokes equation down to whatever you need it to be. So that's a big difference that I didn't appreciate when I was in college, that now I'm somewhat thankful for and understand the reason and why we were taught random things like physical chemistry. It's all about how can you solve a problem and understand the base underlying concept behind it.
Yeah,
You
I
guys will
think
use ChemCAD.
as an engineer, the most complicated equation I've ever had to set up was just a massive, essentially, unit mass balance of, if this is how many barrels of crap we have coming in, how much should be coming out? And really knowing the basics is going to be very important, because you're not really going to be using it, but you need to have that fundamental understanding in order to use kind of platforms and tools like that later on.
Great. We only have about a few minutes left for our session today. Any last questions for our panelists?
Ask some fun ones, guys. Nothing's off the table. Seal is already broken.
Have you guys ever almost got fired for doing something stupid?
I made $1 million mistake. So I designed something and it luckily we didn't, execute it and spend even more money to go do something. But basically I designed something and then we caught during a phase that we call detail engineering. Basically, we were doing really fine quality checks that a contractor and a third party would do for you. And they caught that our flow regime that my pipe was in something called slug flow, which basically, if you can imagine, you have vapor and then liquid, and that vapor can move a lot faster than liquid can. And so you get almost like this smashing of liquid into a pipe, and it can break the pipe and cause loss of containment. Anyways, we don't do it anywhere in our circuit. We had to spend another $1 million to mitigate it and fix it. I was nowhere close to being fired. You're supposed to make mistakes. $1 million might sound a lot to you. It still sounds a lot to me. But when you're working on projects that are 10 or 20 or $30 million and you're designing these things, you're going to have errors and you're going to make mistakes. And the most important part is you learn from them. And I can guarantee you guys right now, I check for my fluid dynamics on every single one of my projects and every single pipe that I do. And so you guys shouldn't be worried about being fired. The easiest way to get fired is misuse your corporate card. It's not to make a mistake in your actual job role. I'm not sure what your experience has been, Natalia.
I fully second that. The easiest way to get fired is to misuse your corporate credit card or say something very stupid to someone you shouldn't. Like, one of not my colleagues, but that's kind of been a going story at the refinery I worked on. And again, it is a story because of how infrequent it is. One of the people stood up during a meeting with like a person 2 levels below a CEO and started talking shit about some of the other people at the refinery, and they're like, yeah, buddy, out. But I have made mistakes like Eric. I think, what was that? I think we lost about $20 million because we didn't load the catalyst correctly. And there was essentially, we didn't order enough catalyst to start the reactor on time. So there was essentially a missed opportunity cost of about $20 million. And again, you're not going to get fired because of that, because everyone makes mistakes and it's expected to happen. And that's kind of, a path to learn. What I do want to kind of encourage you is, if you think or you just realize you've done something wrong, tell that to people quickly and know how to fail fast and recover even faster, because the worst you can do is just kind of try to cover up the mistake you made and not own up to it. And, like in my example, the second I realized we didn't have enough catalyst, I call my process engineering lead and I'm like, Chris, we have to get more, like ASAP. And I think that's kind of the fact that, again, you are humble enough to recognize when you did something wrong and get right people in the loop on that and own up is going to be, again, your best line of defense.
There's a reason that BP and Exxon are, industry leaders, and you can throw Shell and Chevron is, we're really aggressive. We're competitive. We're always gunning. It's like a basketball game, right? You're going to make a risky pass to get a 3-point shot, right? To make the $1 million bucket. And that's kind of the attitude that you have to adopt, is sometimes you're going to miss that shot. That's just plain and simple. You can't make 100% of the shots, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so by making sure you're being aggressive and being competitive, that's how you win in the marketplace. And of course, I'm at ExxonMobil and Natalia's at BP, but we're both doing that and we both have that same mentality.
Yeah. And again, it's as important in a refinery as it's also important in ventures, because, we get a lot of money from BP to go and invest in very new companies that essentially have 90% failure rate. So like, we are taught like, hey, you're going to invest a lot of money and you're probably going to lose a lot of it. But, make sure that some of the investments that you make are going to be the good one. And I think, again, that kind of talks into how dynamic this industry is. And, sometimes you need to make a kind of decision without knowing every single factor, and you need to have a very high risk tolerance for that. And again, I think that's kind of what sets big oil and gas companies like Exxon and BP apart, is, you're going to fail and you're going to lose money, but it's because you can make decisions quickly. And if you lost $20 million one day, chances are you have probably made 10 times as much to a refinery or a company over your lifetime.
On that note, we are at time. I want to thank you all, especially our panelists, for being here today. Thank you for your generous time and your insights into the industry and for talking to our students. Also, thank you to our attendees and students who are here for your engaging questions and for turning on your cameras and showing your faces and being here. Again, apologies for the hiccup in the middle. People have their opinion, but I know those who are here are genuinely here to learn and are curious about the career paths and the options available in the industry. So I appreciate your patience with that as well. Stay tuned for my email tomorrow again. Tomorrow, our careers panel is on careers in teaching. So if any of you is interested in that, please join us, same time, same Zoom link, and come with all your questions. Again, with that, I'd like to thank all our panelists for being here. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Natalia, for answering all our questions. And I hope you all have a great rest of your night.